Facebook today. I'm just going to record.
Hey, David, you have to mute.
David, yeah, I can mute David. Oh, okay, cool. All right, so yeah, save any questions you have for the end or put it in the text box, and hopefully we'll address it after. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about that a Kohen, not every Kohen could serve on the job. As Rashi is going to tell us, that imagine if like the governor came and you needed someone to waiter the governor. You know, you're not going to have the crippled people in your town, although nothing against them, you're not going to have them be the ones that you choose in order to serve him and so on. You're obviously going to choose, you know, not just spiritually holy people, but also physically holy people. You're going to choose these, you know, you're going to a royal place. You want obviously the people to look good. So with that in mind, that's what we're going to start off talking about the Kohen, that the Kohen has to look good. You have to have a good looking Kohen, Mr. Handsome. He has to be Mr. Handsome. If he wants to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, he's got to also have the physical looks on himself. And that's what the Torah starts off discussing and describing this idea to us. We're actually holding Monday's Chumash. So we're going to go to Monday's Chumash and learn it inside about all the requirements, and you're going to learn a list of blemishes. The Torah has, I don't know, maybe like 10 different defects that are not allowed to serve in the temple, but the Gemara, the Rambam actually learns out that there's 140 different defects. So they actually, I guess you had to go through, you know, like you want to get the job, I don't know, you got to go through all the tests to make sure if you want to play the part. So if you want to be the Kohen, you'd have to go through the medical examination, I guess, to make sure that you don't have one of the 140 different blemishes that the Rambam says in order for you to be able to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. Now, it doesn't mean you're not a Kohen if you have the blemish, and it doesn't mean you can't serve once the blemish goes away. It just means that actively, when you're at the times of the blemish, especially if there are things on your face, things that are clearly showing, those are not the people that should be the ones that's serving in the Beis HaMikdash, so they could eat the sacrifices and the Koyanim and so on, but actually active service should be people that can actually do it without any blemishes. Okay, let's see that inside. Verse 16, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, speak to Aaron, Lamar, and say to Aaron, Ish mizaracha, any man from your offspring, the Kohanim, the descendants of the Kohanim, the Deiraisam for all generations, Ashayiyah Baimum, that will have a blemish. It happens in life. Will be a Kohen that will have some kind of a deformity, something that's with them. He's a great guy and he's a Kohen, but he should not be the one in active service inside the Beis HaMikdash. Layikrav, lahakriv, lechem, elikov. He shouldn't be the one to serving the food, the meal. He shouldn't be the guy that's actually serving the meal to Hashem, this, referring to the sacrifices. He shouldn't be the one doing that job if he has a blemish. And as I said, Rashi brings here the example that it's like a meal, and he brings down in one of the notes here that you wouldn't ask the governor, when you're going to bring a meal for the governor, you wouldn't bring the blemished people, you would bring the people without any defects. And any kind of meal, when we say bread here, we're talking about the meal to Hashem, the sacrifices that we give to Hashem. Verse 18, Ki kolish, Asher baimum, because any man that, God forbid, does have a blemish, Lo Yikrav should not be the one dedicating and bringing the sacrifice. It shouldn't be the one that's bringing the sacrifice. Ish. And what are they? And here we go with interesting number of blemishes. We're going to start with the face. I believe I saw in one of the commentaries, he talks about the nose and so on. What's up with that? And that is that the nose is like the first thing you see on a person. So if somebody has a nose that's disproportionate or that is sunken, as the example here, it's not in the right place exactly on the face, that or other things on the face, obviously they're clear blemishes and they should not be serving inside the Beis HaMikdash. What are they? Here we go. Number one, Iver, if the guy's blind, if a person's blind, obviously he shouldn't be serving in the Beis HaMikdash. Oy piseach, or he's lame, right? If the person's lame, also he shouldn't be serving. Or oy charum, oy sarua, or he has a sunken nose, as Rashi describes, that his nose is lower down, and then his eyebrows, if you wanted to paint your eyebrows, you would go from one eyebrow straight to the next because there's no indentation, there's no going in between the eyes where the nose is. It's the wrong place, and the nose is right in the center, in the front of the face, as one of the commentaries say, and therefore that is considered a blemish. Oisarua, or he's missing, or he has mismatching limbs, which means God forbid somebody has. It has happened sometimes. One foot is bigger than the other, or one limb is bigger than the other one. Then the Torah would tell you that this is considered a blemish, and he's not up to par for the kohen serving in the Beis Hamikdash. So you really got to go through this medical examination. And there is going to give us, 10 examples. And then the Rambam and Halacha, the rabbis will learn out 140 details of what is the detailed medical procedure. It sounds like, when you want to fly a plane in the IDF, in the Israeli Air Force, you have to really, really, really have no glasses. You have to have a very high level to get in. So for the kohen job too, it seems like also. Or if someone has a broken leg, or a broken arm. And as we mentioned before, I believe Rashi will say soon, that if it heals, obviously it's not a problem. It's just talking at the time. You don't want a guy with crutches going in the temple and serving. Everybody has to be for this royal case. You want to also get the best looking people to be on the job. Oigibein, the next kind of blemish again on the face, clear defects, is someone has very long eyebrows. So the eyebrows are like hanging down over their eyes. More about the eye, or a cataract, oidak, tevalul be'enai, or cummingly in his eye, which, by the way, I was just in the eye doctor. I happened to be this week. It's funny, and I literally just called me on the phone as I picked up. They look for what's it called with a G or something?
Glaucoma.
Glaucoma, correct. So they're they don't think anything's wrong, but they're monitoring if you have the nerve that's pulled a little bit. People with strong glasses, they might have, and so on. So just now this week, they tell me they have to monitor me. They have to monitor for glaucoma, make sure there's not too much pressure on the eye. It's very interesting. And I actually looked, the eye doctor showed me exactly on the eye, everything, how it works. And so on. Actually, maybe we have the Zimmermans on over here. They're eye doctors and the thing too. Okay. So anyway, here he's talking about the cummingling is that there is a dark indentation line through the pupil, through the black part of your eye. Or a cummingly is when the white of around the dark spot starts protruding and going into the dark spot of the eye. These are all things that are deformities that are right on the face, and they should not be serving as a kohen in the Beis Hamikdash. Or what kind of different kinds of sores that the person might have. Or grav, or yalefes, these lesions that the person's walking around with. Either they're dry, or they're dry on the outside, or wet on the inside, or wet on the outside, dry on the inside. These different kinds of sores do not be, as long as the person has it, should not be. And another one is moirach oshach, crushed testicles. So if there's something also wrong, I guess even though that's not visible on the kohen should not have something wrong with his testicles. They're long and then they're tangled and they're crushed. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but another kind, maybe some, I don't want to say hernia, but whatever. There's something else that's wrong with the person. Maybe it affects how the person walks or so on. And therefore, whatever the reason is, the Torah says that crushed testicles is another case which is not allowed to serve in the Beis Hamikdash if he's a kohen. So all these different blemishes. Verse 21, he concludes saying, Ki kali shashar baimum, because God forbid if anyone does have a blemish, from the offsprings of Aaron, any other kind of moon that's compared, doesn't have to be specifically, this kind of eye and this kind of lesion, anything that's comparable to these deformities, anything similar to it, as I said, up to 140, la yigash lahakriv v'sishi Hashem, you shouldn't come close to bring the sacrifice to Hashem. Mumbai, he has a blemish, aslachem of the kav yigash lahakriv, you should not bring as long as the blemish is there. As Rashi says, if it passes, you're good. No, your foot's not broken anymore. What's the problem? It's fine. But as long as you have a blemish, you're not allowed to bring Hashem's bread, meaning the sacrifices and the gifts to Hashem. You shouldn't be the one on active duty. First, you could have, I guess, backup duty. You could. The army also needs a lot of people to do a lot of other things. It doesn't mean you have to be the one that's standing and serving Hashem, the meal, the sacrifices to Hashem. But you could be, I guess, doing other jobs that a kohen could do. Lechem adekov, the bread of his God, mekotche hakadoshim, umenakotchim bechelu. But even though the kohen is not on this active duty because of this blemish, you know what? You could still eat the sacrifices. So it's not. We're not taking away from the blemished kohen the ability to eat the sacrifices. No, we're just taking away that it shouldn't be an active duty, but he's part of the family, he's part of the group. So therefore, and it doesn't matter the holier sacrifices, the less holy sacrifices, he's not allowed to be on active duty to bring them the actual sacrifices, whether the holy ones or not holy ones, but he still can eat from all the different sacrifices that a regular kohen can eat, even though he himself cannot serve and bring them as a sacrifice. Verse 23, and more than that, he can't bring the sacrifices, he's not allowed to enter the temple to sprinkle the blood. There were certain times which they would sprinkle the blood against the curtain. He's not allowed to do that either. He cannot come near the altar as long as he has a blemish. He should not be operating in the active duty that's bringing these specific jobs, that's bringing the sacrifices to Hashem, and he shouldn't violate my sanctuary, because I am Hashem who makes him holy. And if God forbid a kohen does serve with a blemish, it's a violation and it's no good. The things he does, the things he brings, is not a good sacrifice. Okay, so he's detailing the list of what exactly is not allowed. He can't go into the altar. He can't go into the tabernacle, to the curtain to sprinkle the blood. He should not do those things, but he's allowed to eat the sacrifices. And that is the end of the list of the medical, or whatever you want to call the description of the kohen who is allowed to serve and not allowed to serve. And Moshe spoke to Aaron and those sons, and he says these are the rules and regulations for who could serve as a kohen in active duty. Chapter 22. Now, what about the kohen, even that's serving or eating sacrifices? What about him being in a state of holiness? The kohen has to make sure when he eats these sacrifices, okay, he's not allowed to be unholy. So not just does he serve in the temple, he has to be holy. He can't be impure. Even when he eats the sacrifices, right? He takes them home in Jerusalem. He eats them anywhere in Jerusalem, or wants to eat them in the temple. Man, I'm not serving. It does not matter. Your body, a kohen's body, has to be holy, which means he couldn't have gone to a funeral, even one that was allowed, like we learned yesterday. He's not allowed to be unholy. So now there's another. Look at these regulations. These kohens have a really strict rules, really strict regulations about the things they're allowed. It's not easy. I must tell you, some people, they want to be a kohen. It's actually not easy to be a kohen. Remember yesterday we learned you're not allowed to marry this list of people. And now when you eat these, we're giving you all this meat, but guess what? It comes very dangerous if you eat the meat in a way that you shouldn't eat. So let's learn about the sacrifices, how they should eat it, they should eat it. And that's the next verse. Daber el Aaron, speak to Aaron, Balbanav. Hashem says, Moshe, speak to Aaron and his sons. V'yinozru mekotche b'nei Yisrael. They should remove themselves. If they're ever impure, they should not touch it with a 10-foot pole. They should not go near the sacrifices that we're giving them if they're impure. There's very strict regulations. They're very holy people. This is a very important job that they eat the sacrifices. They cannot be impure. So they do not desecrate my name. That they are sacrificing to me. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. So I don't care whose carbon it is. It could even be their own sacrifices. They are not allowed to eat the sacrifices if they are impure. Okay, what makes them, we're going to see soon what makes the kohen impure, that he's not allowed to eat all these sacrifices that he's getting. He's getting all this meat, but he cannot just eat it as a regular way if he's not holy. Let's see. Emer aleim, tell them, to the generations. And Moses is telling Aaron to tell the children and to pass it on. Kol isha sheyikrav, any kohen who eats mikol zaram from any other offspring, zela kachim, these sacrifices. That the Jewish people are sacrificing to God, they're making holy, right? The Jewish people go and they bring sacrifices to Hashem. The tumasei olav, and God forbid the kohen is pure, so he gets the meat that he's supposed to eat, the portion of meat that he gets, and the kohen is pure. It's a heinous crime. The soul will be cut off from Hashem if they eat it. So it's a very serious crime. Just like the kohen can't go into the temple, it's a very serious crime for him to go into the temple while he's impure. And there's, by the way, there's different kinds of impurities. I think we're going to talk about it soon. Like, for example, you could be impure from having an emission, or from a guy touching the woman who was during her period, or he had leprosy. Whatever the reason was, he is impure, and until he cleans up his impurity, he's not allowed to eat the sacrifice. And if he does, it's a very serious crime that he gets cut off, he gets kares, which we explained, that's the one where he dies by the age of 50, and his descendants also pass away. So it's not a game. It's very big gift that they get the meat, but it's a very serious thing too. Okay, and he says here, we're cut off from before Hashem. What does that mean? If you're saying you were just cut off, you might think he has to move away from Jerusalem, maybe somewhere else. It's cut off from Hashem, which means it's cut off from Hashem, which Hashem is everywhere. So it's a very serious cut off that we're talking about. Verse 4, Ish mizar Ari. Any man from the tribe of Aaron, Vutzarua, Oizav Bakashim. He had leprosy. Right? What if the Kohen got leprosy? You know, the Kohen is always a doctor who tells people they have leprosy. What if the Kohen has leprosy? Or he had an emission, which makes him impure. He's not allowed to eat, as we just mentioned, the sacrifices. But what will make him allowed? Until he becomes pure. And how does he become impure? Either he could have touched a dead body, right? It could have been a parent. He was by the funeral, or maybe he was doing a meis mitzvah, somebody who died is known to bury him. Or he had an emission, it came out of him. He's not pure until he goes through the procedures. Now, we all know, we've been speaking about it. What makes somebody pure? What's the procedure for someone who's impure to become pure? A, we know you got to go to the mikvah. And B, you also have to wait till nightfall. Now, there are other times which you might need more. If someone had leprosy, they have to bring a sacrifice, right? So, here too, they also need to if the Kohen had leprosy, in order to get back to active duty or to be able to eat the sacrifices, he would have to bring that sacrifice. I believe also, if a guy touched a dead body, he needs to get the para aduma, the red heifer, on him in order to make him pure. So whatever the purification process is, you must go through the purification process. The standard purification process with everything is going to the mikvah and waiting till nightfall. So if you just go to the mikvah and it's not nightfall yet, no good. If you just went through nightfall, you didn't go to the mikvah earlier, it's also no good. You have to go to the mikvah sometime during the day, and then when nightfall comes, it will be pure, you'll be good. Or other ways the Kohen could have. There's many different ways. This is why the Kohen has to be so careful. He touches any bug that has enough measurement to make him impure. You know, there's certain bugs we learned about that when they die, the list, what was it? 8 bugs we learned that when they die, they make you impure. So God forbid the Kohen touched that bug of one of these 8 species that we learned, he's impure. Or if a dead person, even just an olive size of a dead person will be enough to make him impure. Or as I said before, he touched someone who was a leprosy, or he touched his wife who was in her menstrual cycle. All these things would rather render him impure, and if he, God forbid, ate sacrifices at that point in time, he would get kares. Would get cut off from before Hashem. It's a very serious crime. And anyone who touches these things will be unclean until he goes to the mikveh and waits till the morning. And then the sun goes down. V'taher, and he'll become pure. After he goes to the mikvah, the sun comes down, then he will become pure. And then he can eat sacrifices, because they are Hashem's sacrifices. Now, what are other things that could make a kohen impure? Well, a lot of things. If you touch them, we said they'll become impure. But guess what? There's something which we learned earlier about, that there is a kosher bird that died with an improper shchita. It was either roadkill or they brought it to be slaughtered, and it was slaughtered incorrectly. Whatever it was, it's called, whatever is an avela, but it's a kosher bird. That has a unique set of rules. Rashi is bringing out here that if you usually you have to touch something to become impure. If somebody sticks an impure thing in your mouth and you swallow it, it's actually not considered impure, because it's not like you touched it. It touched the inside of your body. It's not counted as touching it. You don't become impure. The only exception to the rule is that a kosher bird that was not slaughtered correctly, which is called an avela, a dead bird, chicken, or like fowl that died, lo ya'achal, if the kohen eats it, he'll become impure even through not touching it. So the last verse told us the kohen could become impure by touching all these different things, touching his wife who's in menstrual cycle and so on. He's telling you there's a kind of thing that the kohen could swallow and become impure without even touching it. And then he's not allowed to eat the sacrifices because he's impure. I am Hashem, who gave you the commandments, the Torah says. Shamru esh mishmarti, you should make sure to keep my commandments and not eat not just the sacrifices. You cannot even eat the truma, which is a 2% of our produce that we give to the kohen, right? We have to give to the kohen 2%. That 2% also needs to be eaten in holiness. So we're not just giving a donation here, right? When you give maybe, a poor man the 10%, it's not a problem. You could just give him, he can eat it any way he wants. You give the kohen a sacrifice, or you give the kohen the 2% truma from your stuff. That stuff actually becomes holy, and the kohen's not allowed to eat it when he's in a state of impurity. He won't have a sin, which he will die by the hands of heaven if he eats the 2% that the Jews' donation, the general of the produce, the 2% they give him, because they desecrated it. Ani Hashem Mekadshchem, I am Hashem who's making you holy. So it's again very strict. The sacrifices and the 2% that we give to the kohen, the truma tithe that we give him, the kohen has to eat both those foods actually become holy, and the kohen has to treat it in holiness. Well, here comes an interesting question which we're going to address now. So we have the 2% that we're talking about here. Is the kohen, you give the goat to the kohen, you give him his 2%, and you just told me that the kohen needs to be in a state of holiness in order to eat the 2% that you just gave him. Fine. Well, what about the kohen's wife? Can his wife eat too? What if his wife is not a kohen? What if the wife is a Yisrael? Is she now allowed to eat the 2% donation that the husband gets? Well, what about your workers? Sometimes you have workers who work for you. Sometimes there's people work in the house and we make them lunch. What about the servants? In those days, they would have servants. Are they allowed? What about your kids? What about if you have a daughter and now, and even if your kids are allowed, what if your daughter married another guy who's not a Kohen? Is she allowed to eat from it? We're going to discuss that right now. Those rules in the Torah. Fine. So you're getting the 2%. Is the Kohen allowed to share that 2% with any? It's only for males. It's not for females. How does it work? So the Kohen's getting the 2%, and we're saying this 2% now becomes holy, becomes like a holy, an actually holy item. Like you got to put stuff in Shemus because the Torah is holy. That this truma takes on a holiness. Who's allowed to eat it? So let's see. No non-Kohen, no foreigner, no non-Kohen is allowed to eat the 2% truma that he's getting. However, and also not, even if you're Toishav Kohen, V'sachir lo yochal kodesh, even if you work for the Kohen, but depends what kind of worker you are, whether you're allowed to or you're not allowed to. So what kind of worker is not allowed to do it? So here are two kinds of workers. There was a guy who became a servant of the Kohen, a Jewish guy who became a servant of a Kohen. Now, how long is that servitude for? We know the rule is you're only allowed to be a servant. The Jews are only allowed to be a servant for somebody else for 6 years. We're Hashem's servants. We're not anybody else's servants. So the maximum time is really of 6 years. Now, there is an exception to this rule, is that if after 6 years you really don't want to go back home, it's like a guy who likes to live in jail because they like the supper and the camaraderie he has. Anyway, he really likes his master. He loves his master. He loves living in the house. Doesn't want to go back to real life, and he wants to be a servant for the guy. Then he could stay up to the Jubilee year, to Yovel, to the 50th year. He could stay up to that, whatever the time is. He can only stay up to when the Jubilee year comes out. That's the maximum. Even doesn't matter. He can't stay past that. So there's either a servant who we're calling a sachir here, is a guy who works for the 6 year period, a Jewish guy who works for the 6 year period, or the Jew said, I want to stay past 6 years. I want to stay till the Jubilee year. Then they put a hole, whatever, they have a process, they put a hole in his ear, and he stays for the full 49 years until the 50th year. So now he's there for the longer point in time. Lo yechal kodesh, he, guess what, is not allowed to eat of that 2%. I don't care that you work for the Kohen. You have your own entity, you have your own identity, you're not a Kohen yourself, you're a regular Israelite person, and you're not allowed to partake. This 2% of Truma is for the Kohen. So a Jew who works as a servant for another Jew is not allowed to eat Truma. No one else besides the Kohen is allowed to eat Truma. However, who is allowed to? Verse 11, V'kohen. Ki yikna nefesh. If he buys a soul, what does that mean? That is the other kind of slavery. A non-Jew, as would be the custom in those days, there would be such a thing as slaves, which they really owned the slave. There was no expiration date. There was no date that they go back home. They actually own them. They're kind of like their property, which was the style, again, as was the style in those days. Guess what? The non-Jewish servant is allowed to eat. That's very interesting. The non-Jewish servant is allowed to eat the truma. Why? Because he's like the possession of the Kohen. He becomes part of the Kohen's family, literally. because he's like a possession of the Kohen. You know who else could eat? The Kohen's wife could eat, because when you get married, the wife and the husband become one entity. So the Jew, interestingly, the Jewish servant never becomes totally one with the Kohen, and therefore the Jew, as we said in the previous verse, is not allowed to eat, even though he's a servant. But the non-Jew, who's the servant of the Kohen, who actually his body is owned by the Kohen, is allowed to eat the truma from the Kohen. Very interesting. He's considered like his possessions, and he's allowed to, I think even like an animal, the Kohen is allowed to eat truma too, because the Kohen literally owns the animal. It becomes part of the Kohen's family, literally. He could eat it, Vilid Beisa. Guess what? Of course, the Kohen's children could eat it too. They're part of the family. Now, they could eat together with him. Now, but Rashi's saying, well, obviously the Kohen's son could eat together with the Kohen. He's a Kohen himself. He's saying, no, we're talking about when the servant, the non-Jewish servant, has kids. Some of their owners would have their servants have children, and those children would become their servants too. So a non-Jewish servant's kids becomes a maid servant, whatever, the shifcha, the servants become part of the owner's possession, and they own them now, and they're allowed to eat truma too. So anything, very interesting discrepancy, a difference here. Anything that's owned by the Kohen, literally that he owns them as a possession, can eat truma, can eat the 2%. Anything that is just kind of like working for the Kohen, and the Jew is a servant, is also kind of like just working for the Kohen, is not allowed to eat the 2% from the Kohen. Now, what happens if the guy has a daughter? Bas Kohen, as long as she's home, she could eat. But Kisiya Lishzar, she goes and she marries a stranger, meaning she goes and marries an Israelite or Israelite or a Levi. She goes out of the family. She goes marry another Jew, but the guy's not a Kohen. Now it's confusing. So B'truma Sakachim Leiseichel, she's not allowed to eat anymore. She's now becoming one with the Israelite. She's now considered like the Israelite, and boom, you're not allowed to eat the truma anymore. I don't care that your father's the Kohen. You can't go home and have the meal together, the barbecue, and your family's eating the truma. You cannot eat the truma together with them, because you now have left the Kohen family and become one with the Israelite. The plot thickens, the question gets interesting. What happens if she gets divorced or her husband passes away? Now, what's her deal? Interesting question. She was the daughter of a Kohen. She always ate truma at home. She got married. Her husband then, and now she's not allowed to eat the truma at home. So she moves out of the house. She moves into another house, and her father can share with her the non-truma stuff, but the truma stuff she can't eat anymore. But then her husband Nabach unfortunately passes away. She wants to come back home. Can she move in like she was before? Or she already was kind of separated herself by marrying a non-Kohen, she can't come back. So let's see what the Torah says. Basi's Kohen, with the daughter of a Kohen, grusha. When, after she marries an Israelite, she becomes a widow or a divorcee. But Zera Einla, here's the key. She has no children. Shavel Beisavia, she comes back home a single woman, goes right back into her father's home. Guess what? Kinureha, like her youth, she's back to being a dad's daughter. She is not coming back with any children. She can eat. And no foreigner should eat. But if she has a child, now she's got a problem, because she has a child who's a Yisrael. So there's like something, and the child's not allowed to eat truma because the child's not a Kohen. Even though his grandfather's a Kohen, he's not allowed to eat it. The mother has to go with her child that she's feeding and go along with him. She's not really returning fully back to her Kohen status, because she's locked in by having a child who's a non-Kohen, and therefore she's not allowed to participate in the truma. So if she has no child, she goes back home, becomes like a single girl back home. If she has a child, then she's now chained to her husband, who was a Yisrael, or a Levi, not a Kohen, and she can't go and eat the truma. Now, another thing Rashi tells us here, remember we learned that there's a time period when there's a mourning, it's the worst. The mourning is the worst right at the same day that the person passes away. Before you bury them, it's called an oinen. Now, oinen, we said a regular Kohen is not allowed to serve in the temple. Is that guy allowed to eat truma when he's not allowed to serve in the temple? So he's on that period of mourning, which he's not allowed to serve. Well, can he eat the truma? And the answer is yes. Rashi tells us, we learned from this verse too, that he's allowed to eat the truma even at the state where he's not allowed to serve, because he's in that state of mourning. So again, truma and sacrifices have a high level of holiness. The truma, we went through in detail that at times it could be shared and it can't be shared. I believe the sacrifices, we didn't mention it in detail, but I believe it's a much higher level of stringency. Some of them is only allowed to be eaten by the male Kohanim, and only in certain areas. Now we're not talking about the sacrifices that Jews actually brought in the temple and the Kohen's portion. We're talking about the 2% that the Kohen gets from the produce of the rest of the Jewish people. Verse 14. Now what happens? Oh, somebody makes a mistake. So we just said no foreigners allowed to eat the 2%, the truma of the kohen. What about by mistake? A guy goes, he doesn't realize, maybe he separated for the kohen, then he goes and he eats his wife separated or somebody separated, and he goes and he eats the kohen's food. So what do? How do you pay back? So he has to pay now. He owes the kohen, he owes truma, the what was stolen because he stole, and he has to add a fifth, like we learned other times, right? When you steal something or so on, there's a way that you pay back, plus you add a percentage to it. He pays the kohen back a fifth to what he stole. But nasan l'kohen is a kodesh, and he gives the kohen. He says, "Listen, Mr. Kohen, here is fruit. These are not truma fruit, but I was supposed to give you this amount, this basket of fruit. I'm giving you this basket plus the extra fifth in order to make up for the fact that I stole from the kohen." The Yichadlu is kachim Yisrael. It's a shirim la'Hashem, and kohanim shouldn't desecrate Hashem's name by feeding their food to non-kohens. It has to only be eaten by a kohen. So it's interesting. You have to give the percentage to the kohen, but not just that. It also has a high level of holiness. And the kohanim will bear the iniquity, will bear the responsibility, as kachehem, by non-kohens eating their food. And I am Hashem, who makes you holy. So Hashem separated you, and Hashem made that's prohibited, and therefore, and the kohen is not allowed to share with anybody else the truma that has to go to him. Any questions or comments on today's chumash? So we learned a couple interesting things. We learned about you have to be fit for the job, can't have any blemishes, and we learned about the kohen has to be in a state of purity, and we learned about who, when he's eating even truma, sacrifices and truma. We learned about that the kohen is allowed to share it with certain who yes and who no, and we learned about if someone by accident eats it, how we make up for that. That was today's chumash. Yes, Ira, what's your question? What's a fifth? Yeah. Yes,
I'm a little upset, I guess I could say, where appearances of people matter if you're a Kohen to God. You know what I'm saying? I can see if someone can't see or if someone has a disease or, but if you have long, if this, that, or the other thing, certain just like genetic things that are not or under your control, that or more under God's control, would say why that it's considered where you can't be a Kohen, or you could be a Kohen, but you can't, do normal duties, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't know why God would be concerned over that.
It's a good question. I was trying to kind of deal with it as I was saying the topic. I think we discussed this at length the previous year. I don't know if we came to a final resolution to this question, but maybe one of the things that comes to mind is that it's not part of the temple looking royal and holy is that it should look to us also royal and holy. I'll say 2 points. In other words, let me make another point first. Hashem has a different mission for everybody in life. That doesn't mean you're any less. It doesn't mean you're any less. It's just not it's just not your mission. Doesn't mean you're bad, because you can't be a Air Force pilot person because right, even to be an Air Force pilot, they have regulations. Again, I think it may be in our culture, I'm just thinking out loud with you here. I think in our culture, oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I can't do it. Yeah, it's not your mission in life. It's not your bad. It doesn't mean anything that you're a bad person. It's just not meant for you. Today, everyone has to do what everybody else does. Women and men, everyone has to do the same job. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't make sense for you to be doing that job. Who says that it's not against the person. It's not, and so on. So if you have the people serving in the Beis HaMikdash, the people that are Secret Service or that are serving the president need to look royalty and dignity, representing the office that they're in. So, so I'm saying 2 points. One is it's not just for Hashem. You can serve Hashem by davening. You can serve Hashem by learning. It's just meant you're not for the job. Now, when you're the way Rashi describes it is that you're going to bring the governor food, and he comes to your town, you're not going to bring blemished people to give the governor food. So it's not that people are any worse. It's just that means that you need the right person for the job. And if you're limping and you have a defect, a physical defect, you're not meant to be the one in that specific job that they have. But there's many other jobs for you that you could do. I don't know. I think maybe this is our culture. We're so caught up in this like, oh, I can't do it. I mean, no, it's just not the right job for you. Who says? Why? Don't take it personal.
Sure, but I think there's a deeper thing here behind it.
Okay.
First of all, we come into this world to fix things from prior.
Right. Correct.
Okay, so God did that in order to correct something in that person, and that's why I put the decree that you cannot do this kind of work, and I created you that way. Therefore,
right.
I'm telling you not to do it. That's all.
You're perfect. You're perfect for your mission in life. But I also like how what you're spinning to. It's not about what I want. It's about what you're created for. What's your purpose here for? So it's not against you. I didn't make you. Yes, it's not a defect. You don't have a defect. You have a defect for this job, but it's not a. It doesn't mean you have a It doesn't mean you have a defect. In other words, you're perfect for what you're meant for. This is just not your mission. Why are you taking it personal? Why are you getting so offended that you're not meant for this job? This job is not meant for you. Move on. There's 100,000 other jobs that you could do. Maybe today, maybe our culture, we're always offended if it's not. Okay, not everything is for the person. Move on and do something else. It's not against you. It's not personal. Doing this job should be people that don't have physical blemishes, should not be in this job, in this line of duty. That's it. I'm saying like most people don't have these blemishes. Okay, if Hashem made you in the 1%, 2%, 5%, that means that's not your mission in life. You should be doing something else instead of that. You're not bad. You just have a different mission in life.
So if there's a Kohen Gadol and
like I'll give you an example.
Wait.
I have a great example for this. You don't have a good. Let's say someone doesn't have a good voice. It doesn't mean you should be chazan. Some people think that everybody needs to be chazan. Everyone needs to be chazan for the show. I'm sorry, Hashem didn't make you. The guy said, "What do you mean? It's a right. Everybody should get a chance to be chazan." The guy, meanwhile, is off tune, whatever. Everyone has to suffer when the guy's deciding that he needs to be the one to be chazan. It's not against you. It's not personal. It's nothing against you. You're just not meant for the job, but you're not meant to be chazan. Yeah,
I understand. But what happened if you have the Kohen Gadol and he's respected, he's amazing, and he gets in an accident and his hand gets chopped off for some reason?
Right. So it's like saying he can't drive a car. It's not against him. It's not personal.
So then that's it. He becomes.
No, I'm saying he can't do the service.
He loses his position.
I guess. Yeah. Hashem didn't want him to be in that position.
I mean, I guess a hand is not right.
But it's not just correct. But it's not just. Maybe that's why Hashem made him get these pimples or whatever.
Right. Exactly.
The formities that he has, because Hashem doesn't want. Pimples? Maybe that's why Hashem. No, but it's a special kind of pimples. It's not just pimples. I don't know, but it's serious pimples, whatever that the guy has. But the thing is that Hashem doesn't want. That's why he got it, because Hashem doesn't want him to serve. It's not his job to serve it.
Did it say also? I recall if you go bald, is that something also?
No, it wasn't one. It wasn't one of the things. But you have no. We discussed haircuts yesterday at length, but. Okay. Yeah.
So, okay, can I say something about that also?
Yes.
We learned about it like last week about the service for Yom Kippur. Actually, it even said if it's so. Ira said if he loses his arm by mistake, by an accident, he cannot serve. So in Yom Kippur, that's why you get the second Kohen, that even if the Kohen go to sleep and at night he have that, carry, then it makes him Thomas, so he cannot do the service, and they bring somebody else before him. That wasn't even in his control, and you need to bring somebody instead of him. So on the same token, if you lose your arm or whatever, then they need to replace you because you're not in the same level.
I want to give an example. I want to give the theme what you're saying. I like what you're saying. The theme that you're saying is it's not about what you could do for me, but right, ask not what your country could do for you, but ask what you could do for country. It's about what you're needed for. Stop asking what it's not about you. It's about what does Hashem need me for? We learned that yesterday in the class, in lunch and learn yesterday. We learned that idea like financially or about those things. Stop asking what I want. It's about what you're needed for. So the guy comes into the position of the company. I want this position. Stop asking that. The company is successful and you're needed very, very much in this area of the company. It's not about where you want to go. There's 100 other positions to fill. This is not right now. Your leg is broken, or let's say your life mission is not over here. It's not to be there. That's the way Hashem made it. It's not about you. It's not about where you want to be. It's about where Hashem wants to be. It's something against you. It's something personal. It's not how Hashem created you. Hashem created all these other people to fulfill that position, and He didn't create you to fulfill that position. So maybe this is, I'm just saying, maybe I'm thinking like that too. It was bothering me also, but maybe this is our society. We all think it's just like the guy who wants to sing in the choir of the school and has the worst voice, and his mother's forcing him to go into the position and complaining to the principal and driving everybody crazy when he should not be in that position, because it's not about him. It's where you need to be, not where your mother wants you to be, or where you want to be, whatever. Ira, a little bit makes sense. I think we got some consent, some understanding over here. Okay, let's move on to any other questions or comments. I see Irina posted, what's a fifth? That's actually an interesting question. So I think I don't remember offhand, it's milabar or milachutz. What that means is a fifth could mean I have, like, how many fifths you have in 100? You have 5 20s in $100. So a fifth would then be, so if the guy ate $100 worth of truma and he violated, he has to pay back the 100 plus a fifth is at a 20, or which means that, or is the fifth maybe included in the original amount? In other words, no. I just, you know what? I let me not complicate it. Let's just say, so a fifth would be, in a simple way, a fifth would be you ate $100 worth. You got to pay that plus a fifth back to the kohen. So you got to pay $120 back to the kohen. I believe that is the meaning of paying back a fifth more than what you. So you ate 100.